Yeah, I have a sixth sense in Commander. When I look at my opponents, all I see is dead people.
I see dead people.
Today on Commander Replay, we're back with some more Paper EDH with Munda Allies versus Elves, Reanimator, and Artifacts. Next on Commander Replay. Help support me and save 15% on singles by using the promo code REPLAY at mothershipaTX.com. Commander Replay t-shirts, available in orange and colors beside orange. So today, I'm going to be piloting Munda Allies, Jaradan's going to be piloting Saheeli the Gifted, D-Manny's going to be piloting Sedris Trader King, and Mango's going to be piloting Numa and Miara Elves. With that, let's get into the game. So Jaradan's going to kick it off first and leads it off with a command tower. And then I drop a Forgotten Cave tapped on my turn. Mango plays a Path of Ancestry, and so does D-Manny. Jaradan takes his turn 2 and plays a Mountain and Swiftfoot Boots. Passing to my turn 2, I follow up with a Rugged Prairie, float some mana into a Soul Ring, and then cast a Temple Bell. Mango plays an Elvish Mystic and scries 1 off the Path of Ancestry. And not to be outdone, D-Manny casts Carrion Feeder with his Path of Ancestry also scrying. Jaradan pays 2 for a Hangerback Walker, and it comes into play with a counter on it. At the end step, I activate Temple Bell, and everyone gets a draw card. On my turn 3, I drop an Urza's Incubator naming Allies, and then I cast Munda for 2 mana. And Munda creates a rally trigger as it ETBs, and I look at 4 non-allies and put them to the bottom. And then because Munda has haste, I attack Jaradan for 3. He doesn't block and takes. Mango plays a Soul Ring and then plays a Numa, and then plays Miara and scries 1 off the Path of Ancestry, putting it to the bottom. D-Manny drops a Dreamscape Artist, and Jaradan plays 4 for Thran Temporal Gateway and passes the turn. At the end step, I activate the Temple Bell once again. And on my turn, I go into combat and swing into D-Manny, he takes 3. And then I drop a Sunbird's Invocation, and everyone has a few expletives for that. Mango plays a Prowess of the Fair, and then they cast a Garruk Unleashed, and they plus it and give one of their creatures +3/+3 and trample, but decides not to have any attacks. On his turn, D-Manny activates the Dreamscape Artist, discarding Rakshasa Debaser and going to find 2 lands. He passes, and then Jaradan pays 4 for his commander, Saheeli the Gifted coming in. He then pluses, makes a servo, and passes. And at the end step, again, I activate the Temple Bell. D-Manny responds with a Winds of Rebuke, targeting the Sunbird's Invocation, bouncing it to my hand, and each of us mill 2 before the Temple Bell trigger resolves. I start my turn with a Gilded Lotus, and then follow that up with a Sword of Feast and Famine, and everyone's like, oh. Mango says they don't like that. Protection from their deck. I explain it was the top deck after the mill. D-Manny says, my bad. And then I send the Munda with the Feast and Famine over to Mango, because they don't have any blockers. They take 5 commander damage, they discard a swamp, and we untap our lands. But I do tell Mango, nothing to worry about. I'm going to give him a card back with the Temple Bell, just not yet. I then cast a Hada Freeblade, triggering Munda and triggering the Hada Freeblade rally abilities. Once again, no allies from the Munda trigger, so all to the bottom. Then I follow that up with the Murasa Pyromancer, putting another counter on the Hada Freeblade and triggering rally from Munda once again. And with the Murasa Pyromancer trigger, I shoot the sack outlet, being the Carrion Feeder. And then I say, oh, why can't you be an ally? And everyone's like, what card? And I'm like, Dockside Extortionist. So 3 cards go to the bottom, and that leaves a Court Entanglers on top. And then after having a pretty good turn, I pass. Mango pays 2 for a Roots of Wisdom. They mill 3, and then they return a Wolverine Riders to their hand. And then they pay 6 to cast the Wolverine Riders. Mango upticks Garruk, and then passes. D-Manny pays 5 for a Siege Gang Commander, gets himself a bunch of Goblins. Mango was worried that I'm going to kill them really quickly with the Sword of Feast and Famine, but I explain that, no, I'm going to kill you guys all at the same speed. Jaradan upticks the Saheeli, makes his next spell cost 1 less for each artifact, then drops a Darksteel Juggernaut, puts boots on the Darksteel Juggernaut, and then swings 6 at us, to which I say, I deserve that. He passes. At the end step, you guys know what's happening, Temple Bell. We draw the Core Entanglers off the top. I play a Windscarred Crag, and then I gain 1 life. And then I retry the Sunbirds, then cast the Core Entanglers. We go trigger, 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 resolving the Sunbird's Invocation first. I say, uh-oh, as I hit a Resolute Blademaster, and everyone's like, do we die? And I'm like, maybe. So the Resolute Blademaster ETBs, giving everything double strike, again triggering the Munda rally, the Pyromancer rally, and then I tap the Hangerback, but Jaradan responds by tapping it and adding a counter. Pyromancer triggers twice. 1 trigger for 4 damage, 1 trigger for 5 damage. I shoot the Wolverine Riders, and then I shoot the Siege Gang Commander. Mango does get a 1/1 off of the Riders dying. With the Munda Rally triggers, I put an Ondu Cleric and a Kazul Warlord on top. I then realize that I forgot 1 Entangler's trigger, and then tap a Goblin. and then I go to combat. Mango gets the Feast and Famine again. So that's 10 damage, discard 2. D-Manny gets the Hada Freeblade, and then I swing into the Saheeli, and Jerdan blocks with the Servo. Mango is now at 15 commander damage from Munda. Can't do anything with the first Feast and Famine trigger, no instant speed effects, but I do untap the second time and then go into the main phase. I tap the Temple Bell, draw a card, draw the Kazul Warlord, cast the Kazul Warlord, Sunbirds triggers, grab the Skull Clamp, Rally trigger, no allies in the top 4 so they go to the bottom. We'll get 2 counters on the Hada Freeblade, tap the Miara, equip the Skull Clamp to the Kazul Warlord, and say go. Pretty good turn right there. Mango plays a Gaia's Cradle on their turn, to which we all say, upgraded precon, huh? They then play an Elven Ambush, getting 8 more Elves. They play 3 for Herald, King of Skemfar. They look at the top 5, and reveal a Cultivator of Blades. And then they tap for 16 green, pay 5 for the Cultivator, use the Fabricate to make servos so that they can actually block, and then he pays 5 for Voice of the Woods, upticks the Garruk, and passes. D-Manny casts a Forbidden Alchemy, looks at his top 4, puts a Blasphemous Act and 2 lands to the graveyard, and everyone's like, what? But then he just casts a Damnation, and everyone's like, okay, got it. Mango responds by paying 1 into the Miara trigger to draw a card. Everything gets blown up to the Damnation. Jerdan gets 3 Thopters from the Hangerback Walker going down. Mango has 6 Elves, and we draw 2 cards off the Skull Clamp. Going to his turn, Jerdan pays 4 for a Prototype Portal, imprinting Chief of the Foundry, and then pays the 3 to create a token of Chief of the Foundry, pluses the Saheeli for cost reduction, and drops a Walking Ballista X4. We get attacked again from the Darksteel Juggernaut. It's got 11 power this time. Ouch. Going into our turn, I recast Munda. I get a Rally trigger, revealing 3 allies, putting them back on top. I activate the Temple Bell, then cast Chasm Guide, triggering the Sunbird's Invocation, getting Kabira Evangel. We get 2 Rally triggers showing the Trample and Lifelink allies, putting them on top. Equip the sword. Jerdan asks the toughness on Munda before the equip, to which I say 4, and he decides to shoot it with the Walking Ballista, so no Sword of Feast and Famine on Munda. Munda goes down. I equip the Feast and Famine to the Chasm Guide, and say D-Manny looks wide open, and says he'll be happy to discard a card, so I send 5 damage his way, and happy to help him discard a Dakmor Salvage. Untap the lands, Skull Clamp on Kabira, and then pass the turn. Mango starts their turn by ulting the Garruk, and I say, why did no one stop this, even though we were the deck with haste? Mango then shoots the Feast and Famine with a Putrevi, and then I say, what did it ever do to you? To which they respond, hit them for 15. They recast Miara, scrying 1. They end the turn, and they get the Garruk Emblem trigger, and it planar bridges for creatures. Mango grabs a Ruthless Winnower with the trigger, and at each player's upkeep, they sacrifice a non-elf. D-Manny draws and dredges the Dakmor Salvage, dumping 2 lands, and then he pays 3 to cast Gate to the Afterlife, and then cracks it to go get Godpharaoh's Gift. Goes to combat, exiles the Siege Gang commander, now getting a 4/4 copy of it, and making 3 goblins on the way in. D-Manny then sends the Siege Gang commander at Saheeli, but Jerdan goes no blocks and just lets it tick down the Saheeli, putting it to 3 loyalty. On his upkeep, Jerdan sacks a Thopter. Jerdan then drops a Scrabbling Claws, which I don't love because our deck does have some graveyard stuff in it. Goes to combat, sends the Darksteel at Mango, and they block with an Elf token. He then uses the Prototype Portal to make another Chief of the Foundry. I start the turn by sacrificing Kabira Evangel to the Sacrifice trigger, drawing 2 with the Skull Clamp. I then equip the Skull Clamp to the Chasm Guide, and then play an Austere Command for all creatures, triggering the Sunbird's Invocation. Mango responds with a Heroic Intervention. Gross. I decide the best play we have available is to Sun Titan with the Sunbird's Invocation, getting Feast and Famine back to play, but Sun Titan is immediately destroyed by the Austere Command. And then I draw 2 off of the Chasm Guide dying with the Skull Clamp. And then I play Akum Battle Stinger, has haste naturally, and its rally trigger is allies get +1/+0. So it triggers itself, and Sunbird's triggers for X2. I say negative, so 2 cards to the bottom. I equip the Feast and Famine, play the Lantern Scout, Sunbird's trigger for 3, we get a Dowsing Dagger, and we give D-Manny the plants. And the Lantern Scout does give everyone lifelink with its rally trigger, and Akum Battle Stinger triggers. It now has 5 power. I ask Jerdan if he has any blockers, he says no, and then Mango says, if you don't hit me, I won't hit you, and I say that's a fine policy. So I swing back over to D-Manny, who doesn't seem to mind the discarding all that much, discards their Dakmor Salvage again, and the lands untap, cast a Molten Echoes naming allies, and then equip the Dowsing Dagger to the Akum Battle Stinger, and then I resolve the Sunbirds from the Molten Echoes trigger, slightly out of order, dropping in a Fervor, and then passing the turn. Mango drops an Elvish Promenade, dropping in 8 more Elves, and then plays an Azoni Thousand-Eyed, making 6 insects, and then sacks an insect to draw a card and gain a life. They cast Bounty of Skemfar, revealing the top 6, They put a Forest into play tapped and an Imperious Perfect into their hand, and then cast it for 3. They then recast their Numa, and then they go to the end step getting the Garruk Emblem trigger, and grab Null Mage Shepherd, which is absolutely disgusting. D-Manny dredges the Dakmor Salvage once again. I ask Mango how many creatures they have, they say 24. Before D-Manny moves to combat, Mango decides to use the Null Mage Shepherd and taps 4 creatures to blow up the God Pharaoh's gift. D-Manny is now sad that he can't get his Shriekmaw back with the ability. D-Manny then casts his commander Sedris and decides to use the Unearth to bring back Shriekmaw and spends a little while trying to figure out what the correct target is, but the correct target is definitely Null Mage Shepherd because with Null Mage Shepherd on the battlefield, 2 card types can't exist. Mango shoots our Sunbirds, our Feast and Famine, shoots Jerdan's Prototype Portal, blows up D-Manny's God Pharaoh's gift, blows up Jerdan's Thran Temporal Gateway. In response, Jerdan activates the gateway and puts in a Meteor Golem, and then shoots the creature that makes us sack non-elves. And at the end step, the Shriekmaw gets exiled from the Sedris trigger. And Mango gets another token, and then going to his turn, Jerdan plays a Magnifying Glass. Jerdan pluses Saheeli to 5, the next spell costs 3 less, they cast a Reverse Engineer, they improvise and draw 3 cards, they pay 1 mana for Retrofitter Foundry, they tap it to create a Servo, and decides to send the Darksteel into Mango, and then Mango chumps with an Insect. And like we've been doing all game, end step, everyone draws a card with the Temple Bell. I get 3 mana off the Gilded Lotus, it's all red, drop a Talisman, then drop in a Taurine Mauler, trigger, 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 trigger. We get a Taurine Mauler clone, lose a life off the Talisman, make more red. Then we cast the Ondu Champion. Trigger, 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 trigger. This one gives all allies trample. And then there have been 4 Akum Battlestinger triggers. I drop in an Aurelia the War Leader, and then put a Skull Clamp on it. Go to combat. And then I say, Mango, I think it's your time. Mango tries to wiggle out of death by offering me a cookie.
Is it cookie?
No, it is not a cookie.
Little do they know that I love cookies. However, I love winning games of Commander more, and I kinda sense what's coming. A 6th sense, if you will.
I see dead people.
Anyway, I send a more than lethal attack in Mango's direction. Mango asks, how much damage? And I'm like, I don't know. After counting for what seemed like forever, I determined that it's 34 damage. And because they have lifelink, we do gain 34. Note that I gained 6 more life than I was supposed to by accident. Because math is hard after doing that much counting already to remember how big the creatures were. Mango doesn't block and just goes down to combat damage. They probably could have killed a few of our creatures in blocks, but they opted not to do so. And then we go to combat number 2, and then sends it all at Jerdan. Mango announces that we would have all died if they had untapped, as they drew into an Enray's Forerunners with the last Temple Bell activation, and I said, yeah, I kinda sensed that coming. So second combat, we send everything into Jerdan. Jerdan takes 34 and goes down to 4. And we gain 34 more, going to 98 life. And then I untap Aurelia because I remembered she has Vigilance. D-Manny plays an Archaeomancer, getting back Blasphemous Act, blowing up the board once again. We draw 2 cards with the Skull Clamp. D-Manny then casts Royal Scions and decides to +1 to draw a card and discard a card. And he discards the Dakmor Salvage once again. D-Manny says, alright Jerdan, it's time to start chipping away at his life total, and I say, what did I do? Jerdan plays a Brutaclad on his turn, and then follows that up with a Treasure Naver, and then creates a Servo with the Retrofitter Foundry, pluses Saheeli to create another Servo, and turns all of his Servos into mirrors. Jerdan sends his team at us, we have no blockers, so we take and go down to 83. And then at the end step, I cast a Valakut Awakening, putting 3 cards to the bottom and drawing 4. And then on my turn, I play a Dusk, destroying all creatures with power 3 or greater, leaving Jerdan with no blockers. We get a Hezret's Monument, then we play a Tome of Legends, cast Munda, get a counter on the Tome of Echoes, decline the trigger from Molten Echoes, use the Hezret's Monument on cast to discard a land and draw a card. I then resolve the Munda Rally trigger, leaving Firemantle Mage on top. Then drop in a Legion's Initiative, put the Skull Clamp on the Munda, send the Munda into Jerdan. Jerdan has no blockers and goes down to combat damage. And then I pass like that. D-Manny dredges the Dakmor Salvage again, starts with the Dark Ritual, then casts Doom Whisperer, then surveils 1 time, puts 2 creatures to the graveyard, pays 2 more life, puts Wonder in the graveyard and leaves a card on top. They plus the Scions to 7, draw a card, discard a Meteor Golem, and then drops an Amphin Mutineer, exiling Munda and denying the Skull Clamp trigger because it's exile. But we do get a 4-3. I asked D-Manny how many cards in hand he has. He says 1, it's the Dakmor Salvage, so I said make it 1 more, activate the Temple Bell again. I drop a Sword of the Animist, and then I say, what's everyone's favorite game show? Wheel of Misfortune. I pay 23, and D-Manny picks 0. We go down to 60. And then I Aftermath Dawn, I get back Taurine Mauler, Akoum Battlestinger, Kabira Evangel, Had a Freeblade, and Resolute Blademaster. Probably one of the best Dawns I've ever played. I then cast an Ogre Battle Driver, then with all of the cost reduction and the red floating, pay only a white for the Resolute Blademaster. Team Double Strike. Cast Had a Freeblade, Akoum Battlestinger, and Kabira, getting a copy of each of those, and I actually missed the Resolute Blademaster Molten Echoes trigger. Battle Driver gives everything +2/+0, and I tell D-Manny I have protection from 2 colors and Menace, so he cannot block. He asked me to double check the math, and once I realized that they're all 8/8s with Double Strike, there is more than enough damage on the board. And down he goes! So yeah, we got there with the Munda deck, and overall I thought it was a very good game from everyone, but we had the Soul Ring start into some of the most powerful cards in our deck, like Feast and Famine, Sunbird's Invocation, got Urza's Incubator for the cost reduction, so we just had a lot going value-wise, and we also drew a ton of cards with Temple Bell, so kind of drew everything we needed in the right order, which I think was really the key, and that allowed us to rebuild through the board wipes really easily, and I think that's what got us there. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you like Paper EDH, be sure to let me know in the comments, because these things are a ton of work to make, so I really want to know that you guys are into it. Anyway, as always, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Thank you for watching. I want to thank my awesome Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. If you want to help support the channel, vote on which decks I play next, or if you're just looking to get a game of webcam EDH going, be sure to check out my Patreon at the link below.